Hello, everybody. Fernando Labastida once again in another episode of Linh Talks Tech here with Linh Nguyen. So, getting to a little bit about the tool sprawl. I think in our last conversation you talked about how there's just too many platforms, too many tools that MSPs are using. What trends are you seeing when it comes to are you seeing that this is going to just continue like this, or MSP is going to start to realize that they really need to start consolidating on one or two tools and to kind of like get rid of all this tools? What are you seeing out
Yeah,
there for MSPs? And
I see. So I participate a lot in obviously open bids or RFPs. Companies put out for certain tools for certain things. Here's where the problem is today. Enterprises have so much red tape. MSPs probably even more because they're always looking for tools, but they are. If especially you're talking about the large or medium SIs or even the global SIs, there's a political game of who you know and what you know. And so the tools become trapped in this so-called evaluation phase, right? It's analysis paralysis, right? So if the tool is too complicated, like a traditional tool you install, you have a team configure it, you have all these guys that work in a POC. It could be recently I was in at a customer, and the customer realized they have a performance problem, they have a stability issue, and they need a tool to address this APM, application performance management, and some level of automation. But by the time they realized, because I was there to point out all these issues that they've got, they said they needed a tool. They contacted, I guess somebody dropped a name of some vendor tool, and they started contacting them. By the time they got the vendor to reply and did a demo, the demo is always like nice, right? That you bring out like kind of canned stuff. I was actually sitting on one of these meetings that they had me sit on their behalf with the vendor. I thought it was just one vendor, but the vendor didn't provide the full tool. They had to bring in an add-on to work with this environment. That tool doesn't work. They have to put a plugin. And then so the plugin, now, of course, that's a second vendor. But to implement and glue it all together, they had a consulting firm. So that's three parties. And we're talking about a single solution. The problem statement is very clear, but it required that the vendor, the plugin, the consulting firm. I sat on the meeting for like an hour, and they still couldn't figure out how they were going to show the customer this problem that the customer described to them very in detail that they want this tool to solve. Have this vendor approach of selling a product.
yeah,
You have the consulting firm that wants to make money implementing the tool. And none of them are talking about this actual problem and how this tool would solve it. They're talking about installing it. They're talking about connecting it. They're talking about all these basic out of the box stuff that doesn't solve this problem. And they need to like go back and think about how to solve this problem. So we have this issue in when you ask the original questions, like, yes, there's lots of vendors out there with tools, and tools are everywhere. Where's it going? It's going nowhere because the customers left struggling. Like, I just want to bring in something quickly, show me it works so I can do diligence, and then I can get the budget and I can have a plan, have the people assigned, and then I get the problem solved. But think about it. Your problem is happening now, but the way these guys progress, it might be 6 months before you even get to stage one, right? We think the other way around, more like you need a problem, you need a solution. You don't need tool, you need a solution. Customers don't pay for platforms, they pay for solutions. So
right.
if I was to describe to you, yeah, with this problem, I can solve it by this. Leave the details out, how many products is involved. It's a solution. It's going to cost you this much. You don't need to do anything. You can do it, or we can do it on your behalf. There's two price. Easy, right? It's like, I don't even need a three line item menu. I just need two. Would you like to do most of this? Would you like us to do most of this? That's it. Choose. It's two price. Okay? And your problem is solved with a solution. Don't think about the sausage making and how many products is involved. Because at the end of the day, most vendors out there selling their thing, and then they're selling all these other plugins like a browser extension, man. If you had to open a browser and every time you go to some website to do something that you need done, it asks you to do and go buy an extension, a plugin, you'd go mad.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that's the world of enterprise tool today.
Uh-huh.
It's complete nonsense.
That really is kind of insane. I think you're right. I think the IT department really kind of needs and the vendors that serve the IT department need a mindset shift to
Uh-huh.
look at it as if they were designing a browser for people to go. I mean, can you imagine a grandmother
Uh-huh.
sitting in her in her house by herself browsing something, and she goes to a website of she goes to Facebook, and Facebook asks her to install a plugin to view it. She'd go nuts. She wouldn't know what to do. And that's what, well, that's yeah, there's really got to be something to be done over there. So what you said also reminded me of something else, Lynn, which is that people don't want to buy a drill, and they don't want to buy a drill bit. They want the hole, and they don't even actually want the hole. They want the picture frame, so that they could put the picture that they bought of this new artist in town.
Uh-huh.
They wanted the painting there. So actually that's what they want. They want the painting on the wall of their house. They don't want to buy a drill,
Uh-huh.
and a drill bit. And so IT people, they want to have the solution to the problem that they're experiencing. They don't want to have to talk to 3 different vendors and all that kind of stuff. Right. So what are some other incongruities that you're seeing out there, with MSPs and with the IT department, that's like, makes you scratch your head and think, this doesn't make sense.
It happens a lot in projects. They tend to focus on hosting and managing customer environment, which is what they contract to do. But it rarely stops there, right? So think about this. If you are the main service provider for a customer, you have to be equipped to answer all questions day to day. Oh, I need an expert in this area. I need somebody to configure this, help me. I just bought this product. I need somebody to know how to install this, configure it. I need to have some monitoring of this because I just added these systems and servers. The MSP, when you don't have, let's say you don't have a Swiss Army knife in your tool set, you everything is, everything just like looks like a nail. You have a hammer. That's all and so that's the problem. They don't do the service, or they do it very minimally because they don't have the tool that can be flexible enough to address all these problems. So that's the platform we talk about, right? It's not just one tool for one purpose.
You have to look at it as if you're a multiple, you have multiple tools. You can't just be the hammer looking for the nail everywhere. It's like, what's the appropriate solution to this particular situation? Yeah, that's great. One of the other things that I wanted to ask you about, Lane, was, okay, so cloud migration. I know that IT-Conductor has a cloud migration assessment tool. Most companies now aren't most of the large Fortune 500, maybe even Fortune 5,000, haven't they already migrated to the cloud, or are there still a lot of stragglers out there that haven't migrated and that are going to need help doing this?
Well, I mean, I think there's only like 15% of people that actually enterprise that actually have gone to cloud. There's still a lot of workloads running on old infrastructure. They're delaying for one reason or another. Upgrades are expensive. They also require new servers, new systems.
Right.
But we see that there's a lot of like sideway movements, like trying to extend the life of what they've got, to consolidate data centers, maybe logistical reasons. But I think it's just avoidance, to be
Yeah.
honest. At some point, they have to bite the bullet and do that, right? I think the main issue that I see is that once you decide that you need to have this new infrastructure to accommodate applications or cloud or AI or whatever, or maybe more data, you need to be able to have a plan to move, like whether it's 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, whatever it is, depending on how much workload. That sort of thing puts a lot of company into a bad situation because then you're starting to, again, look for vendors or cloud service provider who can manage that complexity of migrating. Remember, if your business is running on something, it's not just like, I'll shut down for a week and migrate. You have to plan, execute, test carefully so you don't have this extended outage that most business can't handle, at least not the enterprise 24/7 type, manufacturing, healthcare, whatever. Migration is a risky business, meaning that unless your stuff is just so modern, it's so easy to lift and shift to somewhere else. Most customers are not. They have lots of complexity, bolt-ons and databases, and that people that installed it have left. They don't know. Sometimes you'd be surprised. I've been working on places where customer doesn't even know like their backups. We just assume it gets backed up. We haven't restored for a long time. We don't know. When we talk about migration, there's all this complexity that comes up. The question is, if you wanted to migrate, you want to be able to have an assessment done quickly so you can judge the size of the challenge and whether you have the budget, the time to do that.
Right.
So we see the first main hurdle is the assessment. If the assessment is too complicated, too long, costly, customers will not engage.
Right.
You should be able to, just like when you go and I say, I want to do maybe a roofing job on my house, just need new roofs. I just call up 5 local roofing guys who are bond and certified and, get up a quotes and then maybe check reference on a couple of them and, negotiate. I'm done. That's how we should think about migrations. Right? Let's say, get it quickly, assess based on their strengths and weaknesses, their approach, right? Are they all manual? Are they automated? They semi-automated? Do they use best practices? Are they, whatever? So whatever criteria you come up with, that needs to be done quickly in a matter, and it has to be data driven, because I've seen companies who do, like, for instance, solar installs where they just stare at your roof from the satellites, right? They don't even come out. They just look at your roof from some satellite imagery. They have no idea how old your roof is. They don't have any problems with this or that. And then they give you a quote. That's fine. But you have to get some level of data to give you confidence that how accurate is this quote. Because the quote might be that when I start doing the work, oh, there's a slippage. I need to charge you more for this. I didn't know that, you have this there and you have shades over here. You have tree over there. So the problem then comes in a cloud migration. If you're not doing a data-driven approach to the assessment, again, back to spreadsheets and documents, and think about hundreds of systems, applications, and you're relying on very paper-based way of estimating the risk, the cost, the effort, you should really be using for instrumentation of how complex your environment are.
Yeah.
If you walk into, if I say the customer is, I'm going to compare a very kind of like best practice customer versus kind of very low end. They don't know what they, one guy, you walk in, you ask for system information. How old your system? How big your database? What version they are? They're like, no idea. How do I go get in this information? Or you need to talk to the guys in infrastructure because we just deal with applications. And you end up like running around interviewing, like I've done this for migrations, unfortunately. You sit there and you interview like, 10 people across different groups.
Gee.
And getting stuff from them in little chunks, paper here and Excel there, a PDF there. Then you spend an enormous amount of time pouring through, and then you come up with, your best guess of what the complexity and the effort. And now you go to the other end where the customer's like all up to date and all things. You go in there and you ask them, you go, oh, look, I can show you, I'll log you in to this console dashboard, and I'll show you all my landscape of systems, what applications they have, what versions you can click. You can download a report. You can see interrelationship. You can see baseline of how the systems are utilized, how busy it is, thousands of users, and what kind of health state it's in. Difference is that one is data driven, one is not, right? The data driven one, I have that data. I can just essentially pull this data down and have, systematic way to go through and create a baseline and say, well, looks like you're going to move, 50 terabyte of space. You move 100 systems. 100 of them are this kind, 200 of them are that kind. So you get into this data-driven approach, and you can get the assessment done much more accurate, much faster. And if the customer is not ready to move, right, and you have this way of collecting and keeping up to date, you can always come back 3 months, 6 months, and just get a refresh.
Right.
So the difference is that migrations are complex. You don't need to make the assessment more complex.
And then how would, for example, IT conductors, the cloud migration assessment, how does that resolve the whole assessment scenario?
Yeah, so we use, as I say, our process is that we call it 5D. First one is to discover. And when I'm talking about discover, design, develop, deploy, but I'll just talk about the assessment, which is mainly the discover and the distill part.
Right.
Because that's data. So again, regardless how the customer is, whether they're sophisticated, not sophisticated, our technology can go in to the discovery really fast. We're kind of dropping in some agentless technology to gather the information about their environment.
Right.
It's level 1 collection, right? So like, how many systems you got, how many applications, blah, blah, blah. So that gets you the landscape. The next level is that now I need deeper information, because migration means you have to understand well about the source system. Otherwise, you might migrate to something that's not suitable for it. Maybe it needs a redesign. Maybe it needs to be rebuilt, right? Maybe it needs to size up, size down, whatever. You need to understand what this application is about, where it is today, what problems it has day to day, how it performs, what kind of errors it has, so that you can project to the new environment and make it better. Without understanding where you are today, how can you make it better? Right? So we use real data-driven approach using our intelligent data collection. We can keep a live pulse on the system. We can tell customers, look, your system has this problem. It's overusing capacity, CPU. It doesn't have enough memory. It's got a lot of performance problems. There's a lot of users getting dropped out. All these operational issues, we do this, we call kind of baseline. So we know intimately, look at the environment, what the issues are, that when we migrate, we can account for these, right? We see these issues. We need to address that during the migration. We need to test for that scenario. And then we also need to compare. Let's say I'm performing, who wants to spend millions of dollars, move to something and it runs slower than their source system? Oh, it's happened. I'm not making it up. I've been in customer environment where they didn't do due diligence of this nature. They didn't test for these and compare their baseline and optimize it. And they went live on something that was slower, and they got complaints on day one.
What a disaster.
Right. So when we do this deal, we do the baseline. We do discovery, we get the information. Whatever it is, whether it's an Oracle database, an SAP HANA database, whether it's Linux, Windows, whether it's spread across multiple geography in a single data center, we can get a very good overview. And then we combine that with the deep data. So first we go wide, the environment, then we go deep, we get the data about each environment, right?
Right.
And we have that thing live in a dashboard. We have inventory, we have real system information, we have real usage information, and that provides the basis for the architect to design the target environment.
That's perfect. It's kind of like when, now with cars these days that are very, they have so many different microchips and electronics in them. When you go to the garage, they just plug in a cable and they can do a diagnostic automatically with your car. That sounds like as though that's the analogy that I'm thinking about right now with that tool. What has been the reactions with MSPs when they start using, the cloud assessment migration, the cloud migration assessment tool?
Well, because they deal with most MSP, they end up with a deal because, well, some of them, they just manage the customer, but a lot of them are part of the migration, because after they migrated, they manage, or maybe they're already managing today on-prem for the customer, and they're doing the migration to a cloud, and then they will take over the day-to-day operations. So MSP have a huge role to play. They're the one that the customer look to and say, hey, I'm here today, but I want to be over there. And if you guys want to be part of this process to manage that, including the migration, those who migrate are like the house builder. They knew how the house was built. They know the architecture, the blueprint. Who
Right.
best to manage that, right? So the MSPs have a responsibility when the customer asks them if they want this business and who they don't want the business. So every year of migration, there's like 7 years of services to manage. So MSPs, they don't have a tool set. They should look into that in order to help them with the assessment. Again, not all assessments end up with migration, but the assessment is the foundation. If the customer is not ready now, and if the MSP do the right job, the data is fresh, customer can always think about coming back future date when they have budget or the timeline moves closer to some event like, oh, I need to upgrade my licenses because now, it's up for renewal and maybe it's cheaper to go there. Well,
Yeah.
MSP, if they have that data ready, you can just refresh, right? Here's your new quote. You were here 3 months ago. You were here 6 months ago. Now you're here. Now we project that information for the cloud, and I can give you. But if you're constantly connected, that's what IT-Conductor can do, is provide the data-driven collection and looking at systematically the monitoring of their environment, so that when they come ready to do this actual migration, data is ready. You don't have to do anything. You're just refreshing and looking at the differences. So for MSP, they can do that in assessment. But beyond that, after you do assessment, and if you get the deal, what's going to happen? They're going to look to you to say, oh, you did the assessment. Would you like to bid for the actual migration? Because that can be two separate.
Right.
It's kind of like the smoke check. I can go to smoke check, but I cannot repair it, right? Some independence. Sometimes there's that. If let's say you were to migrate, the customer is going to ask for comparison. How are you different than the other 10 that wants to migrate my environment? Well, MSP, if their answer includes automation, best practices, these type of the thing, the answers, not only to do the migration well, but I also have tool after we migrate you, we will manage you using best tools, best solutions for automation, operation, lights out. So you're using 10 people today to manage manually, you can go to 3 with automation tools. This is a clear differentiator for MSPs.